And, these are the same questions Mary Wollstonecraft was asking 100 years prior. So the pattern, rolls on. And then finally you get to someone like Betty Friedan, who was very much a crypto-communist. She hid her communist affiliations entirely. But her whole book, The Feminine Mystique, is really about trying to get women into the workplace and get them out of the comfortable concentration camp, which is the home, and moves out into work, and really makes the argument based on a lot of psychology, things like the fear of missing out and, all of that kind of manipulation that she uses and used to try and get women to just really believe that they would be happiest if they just worked, they didn't have husbands and children. And that's really what I think we've been living with and what we see now. And it's pretty remarkable when you see all of these pieces come together, because suddenly the abortion movement makes so much sense. And this is how women have been really groomed to believe that their children are an obstacle to their happiness, and how we've gotten to this point where women are so open to and forcefully open to the idea of abortion, because we've been so indoctrinated into believing that work is really where we're going to be the happiest and not really anywhere else. So that's really I think the biggest, this whole set of lies kind of coming together. But we can see the fruit of it undermining the family, undermining the faith, and even undermining women. I mean, this is the hardest part, is just saying none of the data shows that women are happier because of this. Feminism has not made women happier. It's made them more medicated and more miserable, but it's certainly not bearing the fruit that, women are promised from it.
Yeah. And thank you for that. I mean, it's like a 10-minute summary of all that you've shared and all the research that's gone on. And I'm sure it's shocking to some people to hear about, the occult as part of the roots of feminism. And yet your research is very clear. It is crystal clear on this point. One of the things that you've also spoken about is just the role of tragedy. Some of the leading characters that you've mentioned, they have, they experienced horrific things. Mm-hmm. What is the role of tragedy and perhaps an incorrect response to those tragedies in their personal lives? What role does that play in this as this all unfolded?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting topic, and I wish I had more psychological background, and I've learned an awful lot through this about psychology and just the way the mind works and whatnot. But starting back from Mary Wollstonecraft, you can see right away that this is a woman who had horrible parents. That it's just an incredibly awful example of what a mother and father ought to be. You had this very abusive, alcoholic father. There's this horrible story about the dad hanging the dog one day. Like, he got mad and he just killed the dog, and beating his wife, and just awful. And the wife was not a great model of womanhood either. And so it's this kind of reality that is imprinted, and you see this through all these women. There's various stages of abuse, there's trauma, all kinds of things that have happened with most of these women throughout their lives, or at different stages of their lives. And the reaction invariably isn't, well, this is my parents are a bad example, or this is something that happened to me that is a one-off, or doesn't mean that all men are bad. But the reaction is, parents are bad. And you can see this in Mary Wollstonecraft's work. In particular, she's got some novels where in the novel she speaks about this kind of ideal of free love, of getting out of monogamy, and how that's really where the best relationships will be, and that's where children will be cared for. And again, this is the same idea is reverberated back in the early 1900s by other women. This belief that if we just didn't have the confines and the constrictures of marriage, then everything would sort of fall into place in a beautiful way, and people wouldn't be so damaged. So this is the hard reality. Is it's sort of this brokenness leads to a real misguided sense of what it is we ought to do to correct these problems. And of course, it's the idea is all men are bad. We need to get rid of men. We need to get rid of hierarchy. We need to get rid of the church. We need to get rid of the army. We need to get rid of any kind of, elements that are created by the genius of men, so to speak. And just bring down into a very egalitarian reality. And, it's really communism. And of course, they just end up being creating and wreaking more havoc in their lives, because, just their relationships and the kind of no bonds, no monogamy, no commitments, all of that is just, is a disaster.